What's up, everybody? Z Panther here. Sorry if I sound a little scratchy. That's because I am sick currently. Um, it's been a while since I've done a video. I'm sorry about that. I was having mic troubles, but finally got that figured out. And I will have the Magneton video out after this one. I just felt that this would be a better topic to come back into YouTube with, since it's something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and I think that it's something that a lot of new players have questions on, and that would be beat up in ADV. Beat up is a pretty unique move in ADV because it does typeless damage, but it is a dark type move and it isn't very well spread. There's really not that many users of it. But basically what beat up does is it takes the base attack of every Pokemon in your party and applies that in the form of a 6-hit move to the Pokemon you're using it against their base defense, not their defense after EVs, but the actual base stat. So to mons like Blissey, beat up does an absolute ton, and that is why beat up is actually pretty much used in ADV, is really just for Blissey, nothing else. Had someone use Chansey or whatever, beat up might honestly just OHKO it. I've never seen that interaction because obviously Chansey is not used, but in ADV, beat up is pretty much exclusively for Blissey, and there are 3 users of it, 2 that are very common, 1 that is not so common but I've been experimenting with, and we'll get into them. So the first and most obvious one is Dugtrio. Typically, Dugtrio with beat up will be running a Jolly Nature. That's just so it can hit certain benchmarks. There's 2 different spreads, and I will show them to you in a second. But first, we will go over the 3 users and their most common moves. So, beat up Doug, I've pretty much seen exclusively with these 4 moves, which would be Earthquake, of course. It needs its stab, Hidden Power Bug for Celebi, just like any other Dugtrio. Aerial Ace for the Heracross and Breloons, because that is still a very important thing that Dugtrio does. But in place of the what is normally Rock Slide on Standard Doug, you run Beat Up. Still with the Choice Band. Choice Band does not affect Beat Up as far as I know. Pretty sure it doesn't. But yeah, you still will use Beat Up even with Choice Band. So like I said, it's typically going to be a Jolly Nature and enough speed for either Jolly +1 DD-Tar. So after a Jolly Tyranitar uses Dragon Dance, it hits, I want to say 364 speed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I sometimes like my beat up Dugs to have enough speed for that speed stat just in case as a backup, because on these beat up Dug teams, DD-Tar is usually pretty scary. Or if you want to run a little slower and run more bulk so that your Dugtrio can live Blissey's Ice Beam after a spike, sometimes you'll go just enough for the base 100s. So that's going to be like that 330 range, anywhere from like 330 to like 335 probably. But that is Dugtrio. That's going to be the most common user. The second most common user, and one of my favorite Pokemon, Charizard. It kind of enables, so the Dugtrio enables special offense, and it does that by typically trap Blissey because it can't actually be switched out of due to Arena Trap, right? And so you pair that with a bunch of special mons, and that's kind of what Dugtrio enables. Charizard, on the other hand, enables mixed offense. So it can't obviously trap Blissey, but because of its fire stab and its strength and its coverage, it's usually really hard to switch into. So oftentimes Blissey will be all that they have, and that's where beat up comes in really clutch because it does an absolute ton to Blissey, especially on mixed offense, where a lot of the teammates of Charizard will be really high attack stat mons like Metagross, like Salamence, sometimes like Tyranitar, Snorlax, things of that nature. And in terms of moves, usually it'll be Fire, Grass, Dragon Claw, Beat Up. That's the most common beat up set. I have seen people use Fire, Hidden Power, Ice, Beat Up, Toxic. I think that is also pretty good. And something that I've also done with Charizard is run Fire, move your Hidden Power of choice, whether that be Grass or Ice, and then Beat Up plus Focus Punch. And the reason why I do that sometimes is just because I don't like trying to getting free Dragon Dances. Obviously, with the beat up set, you can't really hit tar that hard, so it's kind of setup fodder. And running both beat up and punch allows you to stop that from happening. It also lets you focus punch the Blissey as it comes in. And seeing focus punch, they probably think you're a subset, which is the most common set on Zard. And you just hit him with a beat up and take him out. So it is a really cool combo, pretty underrated, I think. If you run that set with Ice, though, it is going to struggle quite a bit versus Swampert, so just keep that in mind. But pretty much everything else, you're able to just kind of blast through with Fire Blast. Just does so much damage. But that is Charizard. It is the enabler of Mixed Offense. And there is one more user in ADV that isn't very popular, but I've been experimenting with it a lot lately, and I've actually been having a lot of success, and that is Houndoom. So Houndoom kind of condenses the roles of, say, a Charizard with its beat up, being able to enable mix offense, but it also kind of compresses the role of something like Moltres by being able to spread Will-O-Wisp, which is a very, very good status in this generation because it can status steel types like Jirachi, Skarmory, pretty much everything. Nothing is really immune to Will-O-Wisp except for the other fires. But a cool thing that Houndoom does is it has Flash Fire, so it's actually somewhat of a check to those other fires. You can come in on a Moltres pretty freely. The only Moltres sets that can really touch Houndoom are like Toxic, so you pursued it, and you're a pretty really good check to that as well. And then Charizard, if it doesn't run sub, or if it's running the beat up set that we just showed, Houndoom can just come in on that and pursue it as well and beat that one-on-one. So Houndoom is kind of cool. It condenses a little bit of Moltres and Charizard, but in exchange you are grounded. But it does have a lot of similarities to Charizard. Like, it's going to be enabling mixed offense for the most part. I have not yet experimented with it on special offense. I think it could be good, maybe. Not sure. But I'd have to do some testing. So far, I've only used it on mixed offense, and it's been really well for me. I've gotten pretty high on ladder with it, and it's done really well for me in the Revival Tour. Sorry. But that way we'll look at the EVs and the movesets a little closer. So as you see here, this is the Dug that hits 265. That's to outspeed Jolly Tar at +1. And that's really as a backup check. And here this is the minimum bulk you need to survive Blissey Ice Beam. I think it can still live after a spike, but it is a roll with this, so just keep that in mind. And then this is the bulkier set. Shout out to SP Funk for having it in their bio for so long that I damn near memorized it. But this is over here. As you can see, it's quite a bit slower. So you want to be a little bit more sturdy into DD tar probably when you use this. But this one hits 333. You could probably even drop down to 330 if you wanted, 331, and then put EVs into another spot somewhere. But what this lets you do is it guarantees you live after a spike. I think you can actually live after 2 spikes to roll, but double check me on that. This is probably the most common Dug you're going to see on special offense, though. It's going to be more fat like this and a little bit slower, but you'll probably see a good mix of both. I typically see this one on stuff that isn't as desperate to trap Blissey. Like it might be a Zapdug with a DD tar, or a Zapdug with some kind of offensive threat that can somewhat muscle through Blissey, maybe like a Subsea Mirachi or something. And Charizard, it's pretty simple. So just max here. You have 4 leftover EVs, you can throw it in special defense you want. I always just kind of throw it in defense since switching into mash quite a bit kind of helps. And like I said before, you can run Hidden Power Ice here. And I would do Toxic in this slot if you did that. So it'd be something like this. Don't worry about the minus nature on attack. It doesn't actually affect beat up's damage since it's going solely off that base attack. But yeah, Houndoom is the last one, and this is a set I've been using the most. This Spadef, if you watch my previous Houndoom video, it's slightly more than what I was using then, but it is for Gengar Thunderbolt rolls. Also helps with Zard Dragonclaw rolls when it's running that, if you're trying to trap that. Blissey T-Bolt, stuff like that. It just, you can kind of shrug them off. It's really not the end of the world. And I think when it comes to a beat up Houndoom, it's really not going to be the best Pursuit user. I've been using Pursuit on it just because the team that I've been using it most on likes the guaranteed Gar chip. But you could honestly run something like Hidden Power Grass in this slot and definitely get away with it. Like Fire, Grass coverage, Willow, and Beat Up is basically Charizard right there, just grounded. And here as an early bird, pretty much always use Flash Fire. I really don't think early bird's ever really worth it. I mean, Hypnogar is very, very rare. Use something you hardly see. And it's not like you're going to be ever switching into Breloom's Spores, so just use Flash Fire. It allows it to be that really good fire check. Without that, you really can't do that. I think that's one of the bigger boons that Houndoom actually has over Charizard is that immunity, as well as Will-O-Wisp, of course. And that's the main thing you're going to be doing with Houndoom is you're going to be spreading Will-O-Wisp. So not much can actually come into a Will-O-Wisp. There's really only 3 things in the whole tier that can come into Houndoom, and 2 of them are waters that it will run in fear of. In Milotic and Starmie. Milo because it can just refresh off the Wisp, and Starmie of course has Natural Cure. But the other is Blissey because of Natural Cure, and of course that's what makes it such a great beat-up user. Because these the stab And when you have a dark move here too, I'm sure you could even run Crunch in the slot. But Fire Stab is really hard to switch into in ADV, even for resists. Like, it just does a lot, especially Will-O-Wisp, since the fires can't switch into Houndoom or they get just Pursuit Trapped. Nothing really comes into Wisp with no consequence. Like, even something like a Milo will have to use a turn to use Refresh. Suicune is going to be forced to rest eventually, etc. You know, so Will-O-Wisp is just really, really good, especially alongside Beat Up. And I think that's what gives it such a good niche. But with that, I think it is time to look at some replays so I can show you these in action. This first one is from my set in Revival. Just turn the music off, and we'll keep it on normal. This I was using Zapdug. So I, of course, sub on the Hariyama. It's a big reason why I don't like Hariyama. And it whirlwinds, which is fine. I just Hydro Pump it as it probably knocks, yep. And they go Blissey here, but they don't go to a Spiker, which is nice. So I'm just switching around. One thing, if I haven't mentioned it already, you saw the Metagross get T-Wave there. If a Pokemon on your team gets statused, it will not count toward the beat up. So keep that in mind. And here you see Doug come in. Now, when I scouted my opponent for this round, they didn't really use a lot of Ice Beam Bliss, which is a big reason why I wanted to bring Zapdug. I briefly looked at it and saw that they used a lot of counter Blissey, so beat up kind of goes hard. As you see, in that scenario, a lot of time they will not Seismic Toss, of course, they will Ice Beam, and there is a chance that Ice Beam could crit or freeze, so Zapdug is definitely not perfect by any means. But that is essentially how the trap works. You will see sub-zap sometimes to facilitate that with Doug, but at this point, now there is no special check. Suicune is just kind of going to cleave through this team. Do I land a grass on Milo? It's been a minute since I have seen these games, but no, I don't. But Tar comes in, and I just go to my own Tar, and this is actually a DD Tar, something that I really like on Zapdug. Yeah, Nyama's way too low after taking the pump. Hariyama sucks. I'm not a believer in it, but here forced to go 40 is pretty wild, but that's what happens when you trap the Blissey. I mean, even stuff like Tar, right? It's not going to want to come into Blissey to set up because this is lefties, because that Blissey had T-Wave. So it's really nice that Blissey gets removed anyway. Even for something you wouldn't really expect. Yeah, and I get whisked, but I take out the car, Tar gets me, and Celebi finishes it off. So yeah, you saw how the trap worked. Now, most of the time, the Blissey will be Ice Beaming you, so keep that in mind. You do have, like, crit chance plus freeze chance to maybe lose on the spot if you don't have a DD Tar of your own, or at least something else that can 1v1 Bliss. So there is a risk. It's definitely not a riskless playstyle, but it is probably the most common style you're going to see with Beat Up. The second one is Mix Off, and this was just a ladder game. I don't use Beat Up Charizard all too much. I'm more a fan of Focus Punch, so excuse the the weird team by my opponent. It is ladder, but so you know how that is. A lot of the mix-offs you're going to see Zard on are going to be pretty similar for the most part. They're going to have typically maybe a Tyranitar, Suicune, Snorlax, Claydol, Salamence sometimes, stuff along that nature. You know, pretty much basically a bunch of things that can beat down Skarmory together or scare it out. And Charizard plays a really big role in that because of how it handles Blissey. I believe here I'm using a pretty cool set. As you see Focus Punch, so I'm using Focus plus Beat Up here. If I remember right, I am just using Fire Grass Focus Beat Up. But that is also, of course, not without risk. You can't always go for a raw Focus Punch. And that is something you will see on a lot of these mix offenses, is there will be a lot of Focus Punches. Like Snorlax will typically be running Focus Punch, or maybe like Cursed Double Edge. Sometimes Tar will, Charizard, of course, very well can. And you also often see fighters on teams like these. Yeah, the reliability of Charizard. Here I just Focus Punch Blissey and did 55%, and now with Beat Up, you just finish it off. And my opponent forfeited. Just couldn't handle the sauce. But you get the point there, how Beat Up really enables the rest of the team. So stuff like Suicune would have to rest loop versus Blissey otherwise, or since this is not Roar, this would actually lose to a Combine Blissey one-on-one. So it is really cool that Charizard can do that. And there is similar for Houndoom. So this one was another set that was in Revival. This one was versus Christos, the guy who runs Pokemon Perfect. And yeah. So this is one of my favorite teams lately. Metagross lead, I just punch, or well, mash, I suppose. And here I just go Loom so I can get the Spore. It'll basically limit the Skarmory to one spike. And of course I'm just going to Focus Punch here. Claydol taken quite a bit, even though it's resisted. Go to my own Claydol. Teams like this typically aren't going to have spin. I'm already expecting like a Salamence or maybe a Blissey or a Celebi has a special check, and the Skarm actually thieves from Houndoom. I forgot that happened. I Will-O-Wisp here, and knowing what kind of structure this is, I know that there's not going to be a Wisp switch, and that forces in Blissey. So it's really good matchup for Houndoom. And just look at these beat up rolls. That one crit is absolutely ridiculous. That literally just one-shot the Blissey with Sand. Absolutely insane. But that just shows you how effective Houndoom is at luring Blissey. I think it's actually better at luring Blissey than Charizard is, just because Charizard often runs Focus Punch. So people are typically very weary to switch Blissey directly in on Zard. They also know about beat up on Zard. Houndoom is a lot less common, so it's not really something you would see all that often. And yeah, I think that I think the Houndoom's actually better at luring Blissey. I think that's that's mainly due to Will-O-Wisp, because Will-O-Wisp has almost no switch-ins, at least no reliable switch-ins. It really forces in that natural Curemonn, and the two natural Curemons in the tier are both weak to beat up Houndoom, right? The Celebi, that other is the other natural Curemon, most common one, is very weak to Houndoom. And Lissy, of course, gets destroyed by beat up. The only like true like mon that can come into Wisp and really scare out Doom is Starmie. But even then, it has to be careful. I mean, you could be running Crunch feasibly. It is definitely a good move. Crunch is very spammable with its Spadef drop chance. So it's definitely not a bad choice there. I definitely think that Houndoom could be explored a little further on styles like these. I stuck pretty similar to like the Zard mix-off kind of structure. I didn't like stray too far. I know you see a Raikou there, and you're probably wondering what the last is, but I mean, it still is the meta doll fire zap check kind of core that you see on special offense, or not special offense, sorry, mixed offense. On the last team, it was Metagross, Claydol, Snorlax, Charizard, but here it just happens to be Metagross, Claydol, Houndoom, Raikou. And in order to have that extra flyer and to compress on defensive typing, Gyarados is here. It acts as, you know, like the Suicune check, the Swampert check, etc. And so I'm a big fan of this 6. I will probably be doing a write-up for this team specifically on forum soon. So look out for that. But I've also tried Snorlax in the Raikou spot, and it works for sure. Actually, I don't quite understand why this is. I think mainly for this, maybe it's because of the speed that Raikou possesses, but the Raikou team always performs a lot better for me. I think it comes down to just having grass to really chunk Pert, and then that speed that it provides. But yeah, at this point, you know, oh, sorry about that. The Charizard is chipped, and that's a mixed mince likely, or I guess it could be a DD mince. Yep, and that's a DD tar. I think it is DD mince in the back if I remember right, actually. I Earthquake here. Oh no, I just DD'd. Yeah. This was a blunder. I thought he was going to Earthquake, expecting my Metagross. But here I just got Metagross. Luckily I hit Mash here, or I just boom, yeah. Smart. Would have been risky had I not. And this is something that you can do pretty frequently on Mixoff too, is you can run stuff like Ice Beam on Claydol. Since you have the Pursuit, it really opens up Claydol's moveset. People use like Rock Slide on it, and they use Ice Beam like you've seen here. But yeah, it's just really quite incredible how strong beat up is on mixed offense. I think mixed offense is a lot better generally into just the metagame, since the or in comparison to special offense, because it's not as auto lose if the trap goes wrong. Like here, you do have heavy hitters that can pressure Blissey. It's not super dependent on it. Like I have 2 booms here, a fighter that has an adamant nature, etc. Gyarados who can smack it really hard and then die if it needed to get Breloom in, you know. stuff like that. I've paths to get through Blissey that aren't solely reliant on the trap, and I think that's why I'm a little bit more of a fan of mixed offense than I am special offense. And I would like to see what you guys do with Houndoom, since it is the least common of these three. If you build with Dugtrio or Charizard, though, I'd like to see that too. You know, my DMs on Discord are always open. I'd love to see the teams you guys make. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. I use beat up quite frequently in ADV. I think it's a really cool tool to know how to use and to um, to enable a lot of really cool offensive structures that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. I mean, special offense itself could have stuff like Kingdra, it could have Jinx, it could have a bunch of really cool special attackers that you very rarely see. So it's definitely a type of offense that enables quite a lot of cool stuff, and that is not possible without beat up Dugtrio. And the same goes for mixed offense. Um, the mixed offenses here that you see are really heavily dependent on the beat up of Charizard or Houndoom. Of course, Charizard is way more common, but just having that move that can completely eliminate not only a special wall material, but Blissey is kind of a physical wall. And can be kind of annoying to a lot of physical offensive mons like Salamence, or it can even be annoying to stuff like Tyranitar Metagross with status like T-Wave. So it's really, really nice to be able to just remove them like that. But with that, guys, this is going to be the end of the video. Drop a comment, drop a like, let me know what you think, and I will be getting that Magneton video out soon. I just gotta record it. Sorry for the long delay between videos, but with that, guys, peace.